Um, I'm just trying to decide if I'm comfortable even talking about that.
This one's wife. Sickly sweet and lacking substance. No, not this one's wife. It's the spread. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. Sickly sweet and lacking substance is very much a description that could be applied to this one's wife, but in actual fact it's in relation to the raspberry spread. So far, we have only had people espousing how wonderful the raspberry spread is where they've been a recipient of a grift box. They have either just produced the material and said how proud they are of this one's wife or how they can't wait to try it, or if they have actually used it, it's been complimentary in relation to the products. But we haven't had anybody so far who's been able to provide us with a more objective review in respect of the product. Because so far, nobody normal, if I can put it that way, has been able to make an actual purchase. More about that in a separate video. All we've seen so far are people who've been sent the grift boxes, who have shown that they have received some raspberry spread, and that hitherto one or two people had just received the raspberry spread on its own, which they had shown in their own Instagram posts. But we haven't had Joe Ordinary claiming that they've made a purchase and that they've tested it out, which is rather interesting and unusual until now. And it would appear that the Daily Mail has obtained some raspberry spread, although the provenance of how they've obtained that does seem rather questionable, and it's going to be something I'm addressing in a separate video. But for now, let's focus on what the Daily Mail has to tell us about the content of this spread. Jane Hertz writes, "This one's wife's as ever raspberry spread has finally arrived after over a year of anticipation." Well, I don't think it's quite that, but there we are. And an entire rebrand. So, is the Duchess's infamous berry concoction really all that she said it's cracked up to be? And the Daily Mail doesn't waste any time because it adds a spoiler. It might be time for her to concentrate on a new formula. The precious jar sold out in minutes, although as I've explained this was likely to be a scarcity manipulation, when they were released on Wednesday. But the Daily Mail managed to get its hands on the $14 raspberry spread, in keepsake packaging no less, for the first public review. Now you'll notice that the Daily Mail just states they've managed to get their hands on the raspberry spread. They didn't say they bought it. They didn't say they purchased it. And I don't think that they have, because I don't think anybody actually can. More about that in a separate video. I'm of the view that this has been sent to the Daily Mail, or that they've managed to procure it from somebody who's received one of the grift boxes, who has agreed to either sell it to the Daily Mail or to provide it for review on the basis that they are not mentioned. I certainly doubt that the Daily Mail has been able to make a purchase when so many other people have said they've not been able to achieve that. And their wording is interesting. Managed to get our hands on the $14 raspberry spread. The confection, which this one's wife has cheesily described as her jam many times, has had much hype surrounding the launch, as she sent 50 jars last year to famous friends such as Kris Jenner under the company's former name, American Riviera Orchard. But make no mistake, her brand has now been rebranded as Ever. And the company claims that the raspberry fruit spread is inspired by the recipe this one's wife crafted in her home kitchen. In other words, it's not made in her kitchen, it's just inspired by it. A vague and amorphous reference to the link between kitchen and what you actually receive. The Duchess previously explained in an episode of her Netflix show, With Love, Meghan, that her preserves can't technically be called jam because jam is equal parts sugar and fruit. I just don't think you can taste the fruit that way, she suggested on the show. Per Food and Wine, jam is regulated by the FDA and it must come from a single fruit containing at least 45% fruit and 55% sugar. What this one's wife is selling under As Ever is not called a jam or a preserve, it's a spread with ingredients of raspberries, organic pure cane sugar, organic lemon juice concentrate, and fruit pectin, a natural stabilizer. On Saturday morning, we unboxed this one's wife's seemingly covetable raspberry spread, which arrived in a small box from FedEx. Well, it might be whoever sent it to them sent it by FedEx. Upon opening, we found a handwritten note from this one's wife herself right on top, printed on thick postcard with her As Ever branding stamped in gold foil. When you flip the card around, there's a message printed in this one's wife's signature calligraphy or filigraphy that reads, "Enjoy, this one's wife." A bit ominous there, Megs. After reading the note, we continued wading through the packaging to find the jam, which was padded in packing peanuts and wrapped in creamy beige paper before we finally got to the pièce de résistance. Because we'd splurged for the keepsake packaging, as the Duchess gave customers no other choice during her initial launch, it meant that the 7.6-ounce jar came in a tan, cylinder-shaped package embossed with the As Ever logo on its front. The over-the-top packaging, which would be hard to reuse due to its jam-shaped hole, reminded us more of a luxury candle than a condiment we'd throw in the fridge after opening. Once we'd finally reached the spread, what immediately struck us about the container was its minuscule size. It's small, containing just 215 grams of spread for $14 or $9 without the keepsake packaging. It feels quite small in your hand too, especially as we compared its size to that of Bon Maman preserves, which contains 370 grams in a 13-ounce jar for around $6. But packaging aside, what really matters here is the taste, and we can't help but think As Ever's signature product might be in a bit of a jam. Immediately upon opening the jar, we were taken aback by its texture. The spread was very liquid and quite thin, a bit loose, if you will. If we hadn't known better, we'd have thought it melted during its expedited journey to us. That being said, it is described by the brand as including a hint of lemon and a fluid texture. Typically, a jar of jam is thicker and sticks together, whereas when we stuck our spoon into this one's wife's raspberry spread, its consistency dripped off the silverware like a sauce. It was unappealing, to say the least. As for the taste, it's extremely sweet, and we mean really sweet. It's reminiscent of a sugary raspberry dessert sauce rather than a jam or spread that's meant to be eaten on a piece of toast. The flavour was also surprisingly strong, which meant we could taste the sour lemon in the spread, which this one's wife had promised in the product's description. After trying it by the spoonful, which left us grimacing from the sweetness, we spread some on a toasted piece of sourdough, which is where things began to take a turn for the worse. It was difficult to eat the spread with a toast, as it was so thin that it dribbled everywhere and made a mess. Our once nicely toasted piece of bread became a sopping wet disaster after just a few minutes. The spread is so sweet that it masks the flavours from the sourdough, with only the sugar from the fruit and the tang of the lemon coming through. Drizzled over vanilla ice cream, a piece of pie, or a big stack of pancakes, the spread may work, and may even shine. But on its own, or eaten as one would expect to be able to enjoy jam, the product crumbled, or rather dripped under the pressure. The jam performed even worse when we compared it to a store-brand raspberry jelly and a jar of Bon Maman, which both had a completely different texture and taste than this one's wife's spread. Both of the jams were much thicker, so thick in fact that you could stick a spoon in both of them and it would stay upright. They were also a tad less sweet than As Ever's raspberry spread and didn't leave our toast soggy. If this one's wife really wants to continue down the jam route, it appears the Duchess may need to come up with a different recipe. The taste is nearly there, but it's the consistency that takes away from the product and makes it an absolute failure. Out of 5 stars, we give it a 2. The Duchess says that jam is her jam, but we're not so sure. Maybe it's sauce. Accordingly, this one's wife's spread is likened more to a dessert sauce, that it's runny, lacks substance, is so sickly sweet that they found it overpowering. Not a particularly inviting review whatsoever for this one's wife's spread. Now, naturally, her supporters will say, well, what do you expect? It's the Daily Mail and they don't like her, so they're bound to be criticising her. Well, you can see for yourselves in the thumbnail, though, that the spread is dripping off the spoon, which rather supports the suggestion of what they are explaining, that it lacks substance, that it is watery, that it went all over the place, and in the circumstances didn't look particularly good, and then when tasted was rather sickly sweet. It is rather ironic that being described as sickly sweet and lacking substance in relation to her spread is something that could equally be applied to this one's wife. But once again, did this one's wife undertake taste tests? Did she ask people? Did she invite people, signing NDAs as always, to test the product, to see what it's thought about? Or is it simply the case that she's just more intent on creating a brand, more about this later, than actually providing something of substance? Is it more chicanery from the Duchess of Delusion? Well, you can make your own minds up about that when I explain it further, but from this, the raspberry spread, at long last being reviewed by someone who isn't somebody selected by this one's wife, certainly doesn't pass muster. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.